All right. Hey, Crossroads, so good to see you. Glad you're here, glad to be back. If you just started going to Crossroads in the last 3 months, we've never met, all right? So my name's Clay Scroggins, as Rusty just said, and I had the privilege the last couple of years of preaching here a bunch and participating as an interim pastor. Really grateful to get to do that, really grateful to get to be back. My wife and I, we live in Atlanta, Georgia. Our kids started school on Wednesday. I would do a praise dance up here, but I don't know that you'd be able to handle it. I love this idea that Rusty had of doing this series called Unoffendable, because it is very easy to find something to get offended by, right? We can all get our feelings hurt about plenty of things. Just this week, it was on Wednesday, first day of school. I was so excited. My wife was so excited. We've got 5 kids. Oldest is in 10th grade. Youngest is in 1st grade. And they all go to the same school. So we drop them off in the morning, have a wonderful day. I had a bunch of work. I've been really busy doing a lot of speaking, a lot of preaching, and had a bunch of meetings in the morning. Went to lunch with somebody, came back from lunch. I was looking at my watch. I was like, it's 2 o'clock. I got to pick the kids up at 3 o'clock. First day of school. I'm going to reward myself, and I'm going to take a little nap. So I set my alarm on my phone, which I just thought, that's just precautionary. I'm not going to need it. I normally take like a 20-minute power nap. You know, the data says, the research says that can help improve your day, just a little quick power nap. But I got my favorite pillow. It's got a flower on the front of it, ball it up, laid down on the couch. And I didn't wake up until that alarm went off at 3 o'clock. I mean, I was dreaming, I was drooling, I was out. Woke up feeling like $1 million, jumped in the car, driving to school, pull up to the school. The principal at the school, who's a friend of mine, younger guy, very sharp young man, really grateful for what he does with his life. I roll the window down and said, Dr. Sheps, how was your first day of school? He said, Mr. Scroggins, great to see you. It's been a great day. How was your nap? I was like, what in the world? How does this man know that I took a nap? I look in the mirror, y'all. I had an imprint of a flower on my face that was so pronounced. I was so embarrassed, and I was slightly offended that he asked me that question, because I didn't believe we knew each other that well. But I guess the flower was so unusual, he had to say something, I guess. Listen, there is a lot we can get offended by. And here's the problem, as Rusty said last week. The offenses that do often happen, and oftentimes we get offended because someone has done something offensive. But the offense gets in the way of a relationship. And our relationships at times, they have the potential to feel competitive. You got any relationships in your life that feel sometimes competitive? Maybe it's somebody at work. Maybe it's somebody in your neighborhood. And it's real easy when we start to feel competitive, it's real easy to get offended. I want to talk today about why it's so dangerous to bring that kind of competition, to bring those kinds of offenses into our relationship, and then to ask the question, is it possible that we might be too competitive? Not in life, all right? I know you all like to be competitive. We've all just watched the Olympics, and we all have the thought, well, I think if you give me 30 days, I could break dance like that, I believe, right? But there is a problem that when life gets too competitive, particularly in the realm of relationships, it can become problematic, right? That when we get too competitive in our relationships, it's real easy. You can advance those slides. I think I'm moving faster than y'all are moving. You can move it all the way to the relationship slide. There you go, one more. Here's the problem. When the games begin in relationships, all of us have a tendency to get offended. When the games begin and there's somebody who's trying to win, it means that somebody's going to feel like a loser. Somebody's going to get offended. And when the games begin, the game is over, right? When the game begins in a relationship, the game is over. And so if you're in a game with somebody in your neighborhood who's trying to get a nicer yard than you, somebody who's trying to get their kids to be more successful than you, somebody who's trying to make more money or show that they've got more money than you, somebody who's trying to show that their side of politics is more right than your side of politics, it's real easy to get offended. Let me ask you though, in our relationships with each other, what's the goal in the relationship? Just think about that a second. What's the win? What's the win in a relationship? What are you aiming for in the relationship? Here's what I think. I think that the win in a relationship, it's the relationship. That the win is that you might be able to have a relationship. You know that you have very slim odds of making a difference in somebody's life that you do not have a relationship with. See, the people in your life that have made the biggest difference in your life are probably people that you have a relationship with. It's probably a grandmother who's been praying for you, or maybe a friend that stuck by your side through really hard times, or maybe it is a coworker who has really helped pull you up when you were in a tough situation. It's hard to make a difference. It's hard to make an impact on somebody when we don't have the relationship. And today I want us to look at 1 Corinthians 9. If you got a Bible, you can go ahead and turn there. 1 Corinthians 9, the Apostle Paul gives us a little bit of a playbook he gives us some insight. He pulls back the curtain on what his goal, on what his hope is in any relationship. And I believe that if we might take the risk of trying on relationships like he's trying relationships, that it might change some things and it might lead to a place where we can be more unoffendable. Because the greatest problem with being offended is that it ruins relationships. Is it possible to have a relationship with someone that you disagree with, and yet you can still have a relationship with someone? Is it possible to have a relationship with someone who has done something or said something or been offensive to you, but yet you were able to still maintain the relationship? It doesn't mean that we have to change our messaging. It doesn't mean that we have to look past the offense. It doesn't mean that we have to even say that they were right. But is it possible to maintain a relationship? Is it possible to become the kind of person that's unoffendable? Here's what Paul said, 1 Corinthians 9. And you got to know Paul, first of all. You got to know who he is, right? But he says in verse 19, he says, though I am free and belong to no one, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. Let me tell you who Paul is. See, Paul was originally, he was named Saul. A lot of you know this because maybe you know a little bit about church history, but Paul was born as a man named Saul. He was a Roman citizen. He was a buttoned-up Jew. He did all the right things. He was filled with doing the right thing, with justice and abiding by the law, making sure all of his T's were crossed and his I's were dotted. But he had this moment, this epiphany, right, where he went from persecuting Christians or followers of the way to one of the most adamant, passionate, zealous Jesus followers that has ever lived overnight. He had this encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus where God changed his name from Saul to Paul. And he realized that God made him, God designed him, God created him, but that his sin stood in the way of a relationship with God. But Jesus came to be a sacrifice for his sin. And this was radically offensive to every person that he had grown up with. So you think about a man like this. This guy, he doesn't have JV offenses. He's got varsity level offenses, right? He's got all these Christians that he had persecuted. They might be like, Paul, I'm happy for your story. I'm happy that you put your faith in Jesus, but I saw what you did to my uncle. I saw what you did to my son. I remember what happened to me, and I'm still bothered by that. I'm still offended by that. On the other side, he's got men and women that he grew up with, that he believed the same thing with, that he ran around with and persecuted Christians with. And now he's on the other side and he's calling them out. And they're going, Saul is what I'm going to call you. I don't like what's happening with you. I don't like the change that's happening with you. We feel offended. And all of these people are out to get him. All of these people, he's got beef on both sides, right? He's got problems with both sides of people. But what he says in verse 19, look at it again. He says, though I am free and belong to no one. And let me just stop and say this to you today. Some of you need to hear it. Did you know that you if you've put your faith in Jesus, that you are free. You're free from anybody's opinion. You're free from anybody's condemnation. You're free from anybody who's trying to put a claim on you. You don't have to be who you used to be. You don't have to be who you were raised to be. You are free today. And you belong to no one. But look at what he does. But he says, however, I make myself a slave to everyone in order to win as many as possible. Let me ask you this question. What was Paul's main goal of his ministry? Based on what you just read in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 19, what was Paul's main goal in his ministry? All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Was it not? That's what he just said. He said, put it up there again, the one with the bolded words, right? He says, though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win. But he's not trying to win an argument. He's not trying to win a competition. He's trying to win somebody over. He's trying to love somebody in such a way. He's trying to serve somebody in such a way that they might look at him and go, man, I don't know what it is that you believe, but you've made a difference in my life. Help me understand, who is this Jesus that you keep talking about? Can you remember the person that did that for you? Can you remember the person that, maybe they wouldn't have put it this way, that they were free, but they became a slave to you. Maybe they would have said it in those words. These are 2,000-year-old words. This is the way Paul put it. But they would have said, I didn't care about cars, but I went to the car show with you because I cared about you. I didn't care about the Cowboys, but I watched the game with you because I cared about you. I didn't care about listening to the kind of music you listen to, but I cared about you. And so I was interested in the things that you were interested in. I tried to understand the culture that you grew up in. I tried to understand some of your pains and some of your problems and some of your proclivities and some of your hang-ups. I tried to understand what it was like to be you because I loved you. Maybe you had a grandmother that did that for you. Maybe you had a coworker that did that for you. Maybe you had a cousin, a brother, a nephew. Maybe it was a friend of yours that said, hey, I got to invite you to my church. And because they loved you, because they served you, because they cared for you as a person, you said yes. And you met Jesus because of that person. You know, just recently here at Crossroads, we had 86 people go public with their faith through baptism. You know how amazing that is? And you know my favorite thing to do? It's kind of like at a wedding, bride's coming down the aisle, all eyes are on the bride. I love watching the groom. I love watching to see what does his face look like when he sees the love of his life. Oftentimes, I like watching the father of the bride to see what is this man thinking about what the price tag that he has put on this whole wedding. How's he doing today, right? But at a baptism, I love looking not only at the person getting baptized, but I love looking at the men and the women who were a part of the story, who invested in that person, who invited that person, who loved that person in the middle of their divorce, who loved that person in the middle of the financial collapse, who loved that person when they were in the pit of their depression and said, I'm going to stick by your side. I'm with you, ride or die. I'm never leaving. I'm never going anywhere. I'm with you. And to see their face when their brother, when their friend, when their spouse goes public with their faith in Jesus, there's nothing like that. He says, that's why I have made myself a slave to others, that I might win as many as possible. And then he gives us his, as the kids call it, he gives us his strat. He's about to tell us his strategy. He said, let me tell you what my strategy is. Here's how I do it. He says, verse 20, he says, to the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. And to those under the law, I became like one under the law, I love that in parentheses. He's probably saying this out loud, saying it to a scribe, right? He's like, hey, write it down like this. He's like, so write it down like this. Say, to those under the law, I became like one under the law. But put in parentheses, though I myself am not under the law. I need to let them know that Jesus has set me free. And it is not what I do, but it's all about what he has done. And because of that, I'm free. Not because of my good works, not because of my good deeds. No. If I had to pile those up and get good enough to get into heaven, I'd never be able to do it. But it's because of him, I'm free. So make sure to put that in parentheses. And the guy's writing, he's like, you gonna put all that? Like put it all? He's like, we don't put all that in it, but just put, though I myself am not under the law, because I'll say it later in Romans and they'll understand what I mean. But just put it like that. He says, so as to win those under the law, verse 21. He keeps going. He says, yeah, but what about those not having the law? Yeah. Those not having the law, when I was around them, I became like one not having the law. Put in parentheses, though I am not free from God's law, I am under Christ's law. It's a new law where Jesus raised the stakes on what it looked like to love others. And he said, I did that so as to win those not having the law. I love this next one. He says, what about those that are weak? What does he mean by that? To those that are weak, I became weak so as to win the weak. You ever had somebody that made you angry because of their bad decisions? They made you mad. You got offended at their bad decisions. I wonder if this is a different way to think about them. Now, there are times, of course, when we get mad, and it's appropriate. And Paul at times you could see, got angry about men and women who were offensive toward God. But in this case, he's saying, I recognize them as weak, that when someone is making decisions, when they are giving in to their selfish impulses, when they continue to make decisions to prioritize themselves, they're just weak. Do you know how hard it is to make selfless decisions on a consistent basis? Somebody can do that? You ain't weak. You're strong if you can do that, right? It takes some strength to prioritize other people, to serve other people, to love other people well. And so what he's saying is, to those that are weak, I tried to understand, where did you come from? What made you weak? What are the wounds in your life? What are the scars in your life that made it difficult for you to get over the things that other people have been able to get over? What is it for you? It doesn't mean that he gives up what he believes. No, Paul still believed what he believed. You know that Paul believed what he believed to the point that he sacrificed his life. He was a martyr for what he believed. You can talk to me about not having near as much conviction as sometimes I feel like I should, but you can't talk to Paul about that. This is a man of conviction. This is a man who stood on business and stood on truth. And he did not back down. But he said, but I didn't wear that as a badge because my goal was not to be right. My goal was not to win the argument. My goal was to win somebody over for Jesus. And that goal has changed everything. Look at what he says. He says, to the weak I became weak that I might win the weak. He says, I have become all things to all people so that by all possible means I might save some. You ever talk to somebody who became a missionary? I've got some good friends that went and lived in different parts of the world as missionaries, met them in grad school, and it was always so remarkable to hear what they were doing. And one of the first things they would do when they became a missionary is they would move into a place that was foreign to them, but they would be as curious as possible and learn everything they could learn about that culture, about the context. Why? Because it's the best way to build a relationship with someone. Since how long has your family been eating those kinds of foods? Where did you get those kinds of practices? Tell us what's important to you. What holidays do you celebrate? How do you see life? I want to understand you. I want to even learn your language because I care about you, because I want to honor you. It doesn't mean I'm changing what I believe or I'm backing down on what I believe or I'm giving up my convictions about what I believe. No, it's about loving you so that I might build a relationship with you that's strong enough to bear the weight of truth. Why does he do it? He says it. Last verse we're going to look at, verse 23. He says, I do all this for the sake of the gospel. I do all this for the sake of the gospel. What is the gospel? This word he's using, this Greek term, it means the good news. You may have heard this before. He's saying, I do all this for the good news. I do all this to proclaim and herald and announce the good news. I want everybody to know that you are dead in your sin. And I was dead in my sin, but Jesus made me alive through his sacrifice on the cross. He provided forgiveness for my sin, and he made me alive, and he did not stay dead. You got a problem with death? Yeah, me too. He's coming to get all of us. Jesus didn't know. Yeah, he was dead for a minute, but then he defeated death. And he lets us join with him in his victory. And so death is going to get you, but it's not going to get you forever if you know him. Now, you can be made alive in Jesus. And I just want you to know that. I can't help but tell you that. I can't help but want you to know that more than I want you to know anything else. Do I want you to vote like me? Sure. But that's small potatoes compared to wanting you to know the gospel. Do I want you to cheer for my team? Sure. Do I want you to know that my team is better than your team? Of course I do. But those are small potatoes compared to wanting you to know the gospel that has been everything to me. And he says, so I do all this for the gospel. Look at this, that I may share in its blessings. Paul knew the greatest blessing in life is getting to be a part of somebody's story of how they met Jesus. And just like there's somebody that's a part of your story, just like when all 86 of those men and women got baptized, there were men and women that were a part of their story. You can be a part of somebody's story as well. Isn't that amazing? Paul knows. I mean, see, this is really tricky. When he says, I do all this that I might save some. You remember how he said that in verse 22? That's confusing, right? Because it's like, is Paul the one doing the saving? No. Paul makes it really clear throughout everything he's written that he is well aware that he is not the one who does the saving. I don't have what it takes to save you. But Jesus does. And this is what's amazing about God. Isn't this incredible? Think about this. The Almighty God, through Jesus Christ our Lord, by the power of his Spirit, can save somebody's life and lets you get to be a part of the process. That's crazy. I don't know. I've never tried any drugs, but I can't imagine that drugs are that powerful. That you get to be used by the Almighty God to be a part of saving somebody's life from eternal damnation, that they get the joy of being one with God for all of eternity, and God goes, would you be interested in being a part of that? I am inviting you into that process. That's crazy. And he says, that's the blessing. And I want you to share in it. I want to share in it. I want to be a part of it. And so I'm going to give you 3 simple ideas, 3 application of what we might do because of this passage, of what might happen if we start to live a life that's unoffendable, of what might happen if we rearrange our values, if we rearrange the way we think about relationship. What is the potential in our relationship? Here's the first one. Number 1, would you be willing to adopt Paul's goal and approach to life? Would you be willing to adopt Paul's goal and his approach to life? This means some things are going to change for you. This means that the most important thing in the world might not be an election, but it's a relationship. This means the most important thing might not be getting somebody to do the right thing. No, eventually you might have to call them out on something lovingly and compassionately, but you might do it in a way that maintains the relationship. This might mean that instead of being right, instead of winning an argument, you might willingly lose an argument to maintain a relationship. Paul says, my whole goal in this, it's not to win, it's to win them over. It's to love this person and serve this person in such a way that I might have the opportunity to one day make a difference in their life, to one day have such influence in their life that I might get to tell them about Jesus, the Savior. That was his goal. That was his approach. Would you be willing to adopt that same goal and that same approach? Number two, would you be willing to live a life of careful and consistent self-examination? Would you be willing to live a life of careful and consistent self-examination? What do I mean by that? I mean that next time you get offended, and you're going to get offended, would you be willing to look in the mirror and go, why does this offend me? What is it about this that offends me? And sometimes you might go, what offends me is the offense. And that's understandable. Paul was offended, but he didn't let the offense get in the way of his relationship. He did everything he could to go, I want to maintain this relationship because I want to win you over. Doesn't mean I don't tell you when you're wrong. It doesn't mean I might lovingly call you out. It doesn't mean I might lovingly disagree with you. It might mean that I might lovingly say, hey, I don't know that we're going to get on the same page on that, but I love you. I care for you. I got your back no matter what. But would you be willing to look in the mirror and go, but why? See, here's what I found. This might not be you, this is me. A lot of times when I get offended by things, it's because my ego has gotten offended. I can't let this person be right because what does that say about me? I can't let this person have the bigger job or the bigger house or the bigger car or tell the better story or have the bigger fish in the picture because what would that say about me? And see, I believe we only get there through careful and consistent self-examination. And all it does for me is when I can name it, God's got a better chance to tame it. You can't tame it until you name it. You got to be able to say what it is. And it's only recently, it's only through some late maturity in my life that I've been able to go, oh, I'm not actually offended by what they did. I'm offended because my ego is bothered. Would you be willing to live a life of careful and consistent self-examination? This ain't easy. This is hard to do, right? And then number three, would you be willing to choose grace over offense? Would you be willing to choose grace over offense? Can I ask you a question? Excuse me. May I ask you a question? Who chose grace over offense for you? Would you mind answering it out loud? You ever thought about this? That your sin, like all those moments where you chose yourself, all those moments where you loved things more than God, that my sin, that all those moments when I loved stuff more than I loved Him, have you ever recognized the fact that that offended Him? But His plan was not to just be right. No, he chose grace over the offense. What does that mean? That He crammed all of His divinity into a human body, His Son Jesus, allowed Jesus to walk planet Earth and pursue people, to love people, to heal people, to lift people up, to care for people, knowing that some of those people would hate Him. You know that? that Jesus loved people, served people, healed people, lifted people up, cared for people, knowing they were going to turn right around and hate him. But he did it anyway. Did you know that? That it's not like Jesus got, I'm going to separate all these people that are going to eventually believe in me. Y'all get over here. All you people who are not, y'all get over here. Okay, for y'all, sorry, too late. You're out. You're done. These people, I'm going to come help y'all. He didn't do that. He said, I have come to give my life as a ransom to all. And he loved and served and lifted up and healed and cared for people that eventually hated him, people that eventually killed him. And so when he asks us, would you be willing to extend grace to someone who has offended you? He's saying, I'm not asking you to do anything that I wouldn't do. Let me rephrase that. I'm not asking you to do anything that I have not already done. I'm not asking you to do anything for someone else that I have not already done for you. I've already given you grace when I could have been offended. I've already given you grace instead of giving you what you deserved. I've already given you grace that you can freely accept. And today, I pray that you do. There are some of you that you've never put your faith in Jesus. Maybe you didn't know that you have offended God. And I don't say that in like a how dare you kind of way, because I have too. I'm just telling you that we've got an amazing God who says, I'm not up here offended by your offense. No, I move toward you and I love you in the midst of the offense. And for some of you, you've never put your faith in Jesus, maybe because you didn't know that. Today's your day. Today is your day. Give him your life. Give him everything. Don't hold anything back. He gave everything to you. Why not give everything to him? Today's your day. And then there's some of you, maybe you've run the other way, and maybe there was a day where your faith was really important to you, but maybe you laid it down, and maybe you've just come back to church, or somebody's invited you again, or it's been a while and you're not even really sure why, but it just has. Would you be willing to rededicate your life today to Jesus? There's something powerful that happens when we say, all right, I don't need to get saved again because he's already saved me, but I need to let him know, I need to let others know that I'm in. I'm tired of playing around. I'm going to live a different kind of life now through the power of Jesus. And then some of you need to make Crossroads your church. Today's the day. Make this place your church. This is a group of people that want to love you and care for you and encourage you and challenge you. I can't think of a better church than this one right here in this community. So would you make today the day for you? So what we're going to do is, like we normally do, we're going to sing a song. And I would just invite you, during that song, just come forward. Give us the opportunity to celebrate with you, whether you're putting your faith in Jesus for the first time, maybe if you feel like you're rededicating your life, or maybe you feel like I want to make this church my church. Would you give us the opportunity to celebrate with you? Let's pray together.